everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Richard Lewis Show. We teased this one a little bit in advance on a couple of Discords because I'm very excited to do it. It'll probably be the last episode of the year by the time you see this. It is with Edward Cleland, a mind-body medicine practitioner who has taken an interest in esports. And the significance of why I'm talking to him today, besides his body of work within the space, is, of course, he joined G2 just before their surprise win at Blast World Finals. So, Edward, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I know you've just got back from a long journey, but I'm guessing with the victory, despite everything that happened before with the sad news about Hooksy, I mean, as positive a mood in the camp as there can be.
Yes, absolutely. And how nice to be sitting here with you today, Richard.
Well, thank you. Very kind. So, look, let's start, right? Because obviously I've talked to a lot of performance coaches and different types of coaches. I introduced a few to my audience, and some of them have gone on into a world of pseudoscience and bullshit, and I consider them a bit of charlatan these days. Some of them, I won't name names, but the work that you're doing, I've obviously looked into it. It does seem to have a very sort of scientifically sound bedrock, a lot of it, and what you're talking about. But I want you to kind of describe what it is you do for a team when you come in and work with them, because you have a ton of testimonials on your website.
Thank you. Yes. So I am a mind-body medicine practitioner, and that always needs to be defined, of course. Some people erroneously will call me a sports psychologist. That's not what I am. So in mind-body medicine, we're looking at the mind and body as one entity. And within that, we're looking at everything from mindfulness and mental health, physical health, physiological health, meaning how the body responds to mental distress. And then, of course, functional nutrition and lifestyle. And I help organizations, teams, and individuals do that across their entire department or category, depending on how their needs are.
So let's talk about that, because you're in the process of completing a PhD, and I understand that the focus of that is essentially performance anxiety is at the crux of it. And I imagine that is a big part of what you do in esports. That's always seemed to be the kind of bottleneck for a lot of great talent I've seen down the years, across multiple games.
Yes. Yeah. Closing the gap between practice and performance on the stage, closing the gap between what you do and with your intentions and your goals, and then with your actions, and navigating that with people oftentimes has to do with anxiety. That's one of the many areas, but how do we reflect what we wish to do in the big moments of our lives, and how do we do that throughout our entire life? So lifestyle is a pretty big element of this, how you manage yourself as a human, not just as a gamer, but as a person, not just as a gamer, but as a team and as an organization. And I'm sure you'll dive into that with G2, and maybe we'll talk about other orgs too, but how the org positions these humans to perform.
Well, I mean, obviously you've done it outside of esports as well. You've done it for very big companies like General Motors and stuff like this. So I imagine every time you approach a project, it's obviously a little bit different, because we're focused on different goals and different outcomes. So if you could talk me through something that sort of typifies what you do, a type of exercise that you would use as like a foundational aspect of helping somebody improve and get the outcomes they want.
It's a really good question. And let me kind of dive into it in two ways. The first off is my background before mind-body medicine was in holistic health education. And when I say the word holistic, what that means is getting to someone where they are. So you can't walk in. I've studied nutrition for 15 plus years. I worked with elite pro traditional athletes, very fine-tuned physical specimens, and created nutrition programs for them. Taking a specific model and trying to jam it into esports does not work.
Yes.
That's not what in the case of Counter-Strike, for instance, you have 5 different people, 5 different backgrounds, League of Legends even is a better example in terms of 5 different cultures, although in G2 we have 5 different cultures in a lot of ways, or at least 3 or 4 represented. Probably 5 plus. You can get into that later too. But the idea is meeting them where they are. So the term holistic really means to meet someone where they are. So that methodology isn't universal. And you have to walk into any given team or organization, and all of the organizations are very different. They have different ways to assess the health and wellness and performance objectives, and different budgets and different ideas of what that should look like. So we're really meeting the people where they are. Now, with that said, in terms of baselines, of course, I have a lot of different baselines. Generally speaking, I want to have every single person do something with their nutrition, with their mental health, with their physiological health, with their movement, with their body, with their lungs, with their throats, with their eyes, with their relationships with each other. So there is a plan. Some of it's formal, some of it's more informal. In terms of how I address each team, in every single team I work with, I have some form of mental health protocol for the team and for individuals, nutritional protocol team and individuals, movement protocol team and individuals. So it is comprehensive, but the players might not necessarily feel like it's running their life. It's more organizational, it's more directional.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that have come into the space, and you get, performance coaches, you get sports psychologists, you get people that specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy. That seems there was a little brief trend where that was popular with some of the teams.
A lot of physical therapists.
Exactly. Yes.
Therapists in the scene. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously nutritionists as well. Obviously you all do different things and focus on different areas. It's probably a very stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. In your professional opinion, what would you say is kind of the most important thing to kind of set right first before you can build on it?
I think it's important that we acknowledge that we're not just trying to squeeze everything out of this fruit and get all the juice that we can and then throw it away. And I see a lot of, and I won't name names, I'm not as strong as you are, so I can't name names, I guess. But the industry is chock full of people who want the gamers to do a certain intervention and want to kind of force it on them, and then want to stand there and get some of the glory for it. Not to say that I haven't received plenty of glory, because I have. I've been grateful for all the acknowledgments I've been getting, but we have to take care of them as people. That's the number one thing. These are people, and we put them in very difficult situations, and we expect a lot from them. And if we're not taking care of them, of them as people, of their health, and however they want to look at that, I think is most important. But we need to do that more than we need to focus on just performance objectives. And when we do that, we get performance objectives. I mean, I have a lot of trophies in my case. I don't know of another practitioner in the scene that has more. I'll just say quickly on the term of performance coach. To me, you could come out of high school and be a performance coach. I don't know what the qualifications for that are. So that's why I actually stand there and go, well, I'm a mind-body medicine practitioner, and I don't mind having to define that for the rest of my life. I feel like that's something I'll do on behalf of my cohort and classmates that I've gone through the field with, and to expand the knowledge in the industry that there are other modalities that can address these things that are not necessarily traditional and allopathic in the Western models, but that doesn't mean they're not science-based. I mean, yes, they're completely science-based. So if you saw my research work, you'd go, oh my gosh, how many citations can you put in this thing? So it's founded in the same as our buddy Huberman Lab or any of these other guys. So it all has to be double-blind type stuff, but there's different ways to approach this.
There's 2 little branching paths I want to explore here. I'll get the first one out the way because it might not be something you can speak on too much. But obviously, I think there are certain types of words that, because there have been so many, bullshit artists and grifters that have, and not just in esports, I'm talking here. I am talking about, in professional sports as well. Certainly in MMA, we've had a few recently as well. But, people that use these types of what I might say buzzwords, or people perceive them to be buzzwords, and they kind of set off alarm bells a little bit. And I wanted to get your view on, how frustrating is it? And for you, when you come in, you say, right, we're going to do, for example, a holistic, approach to resolving your performance issues, and maybe someone's going, holistic, that's one of them words, that's some new age bullshit. And have you encountered any resistance to that?
Oh, sure. But I'm also in my 40s, and I've been in private practice for more than 15 years. Yeah. So it isn't something.
You've heard it all before, right?
I've been an entrepreneur for, I think, 17 years, the LLC or whatever. So I'm not, I've already gone through that. I don't feel the need. It's like if someone religious knocks on my door and says, you have to accept this new God as your God. I go, I've already done enough of that. Thank you. You can leave the pamphlet. I'll check it out, but I'm not going to switch right now. So I'm not too concerned about that. I also think like I said, it gives me an opportunity to kind of express what that really means. And luckily right now, I'm not doing a lot of chasing in terms of, like trying to get new jobs or something. I'm really happy with where I am professionally. We can always grow, as Dan would say, but I don't feel the need to prove myself as much. I feel that, and it's not just the body of work. I feel like I'm at a spot where I kind of know what I'm doing and know where I am and know who I am.
And the other branching path that you were talking about there, and this is something I've been talking about for years, is there are the unscrupulous organizations out there that they treat players you couldn't even say as an asset. That would be too generous. That would be too nice. They treat them as a resource. Exactly. You take care of an asset, a resource, you use it up. And they see players as a resource to essentially, they synthesize their essence, their life force into money via sponsorship opportunities, via success. And then by 24, 25, particularly over in League of Legends, they're on the scrap heap with not really a lot of options. And, it's interesting when you say, we need to, treat athletes like people. A lot of my reporting has been about the kind of, the existential horror of being a young adult, typically under-socialized, if we're being honest about it, thrown into a world of incredible scrutiny with not a lot of guardrails and not a lot of support networks around you. So, I mean, let's talk about that. Obviously, I mean, it seems based on all of the testimonials you've got, first and foremost, you do seem to be a good source of support for the players, just fundamentally.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have to back to that word holistic. We're meeting someone where they are. So you're starting with the person at the center of the model. And any performance model that isn't putting the person at the center of the model and figuring out what makes them tick, how do you support them? How do you organically help them? There's another buzzword for you. How do you though get in the weeds with them and help them grow in the way that they can grow? Mm-hmm. And so that has to be self-guided. If I sit down with an org and they say, well, Edward, give me your proposal for what you and your team are going to do for our esports org. My question is like, what do you guys need? What do you expect? What are we trying to do here? 100 Thieves made it really clear. We're trying to win. G2 made it really clear. We're trying to win. EG made it clear. We're trying to win. We had some pretty clear objectives. Mm-hmm. And so you can come back to them and say, okay, well, what type of resources are you looking for? And everyone looks at these things very differently, though. And I think to the point, though, working with the individual, making sure that you're giving them the tools and resources, that's difficult. That's a difficult process. It's a difficult thing to figure out.
Did when you first came into esports, did any of it shock you?
Oh, I'm still surprised. I'm still surprised when I sit down with a new team or new org. And I've met with, I don't know of many orgs that I haven't had some contact with, in terms of the big orgs, English speaking primarily orgs, I should kind of denote. Mm-hmm. There's always surprises. You don't know what you're going to get when you show up, and the GM can't be there. So the VP of esports is now running coffee and food for the team. You don't know what you're getting out of that human until you do it the first time.
Mm.
You don't know what you're getting out of Nadeshot coming in the room and talking to the team about what's going to happen next map before you're there, or how Jason Lake interacts with his players, and or how the staffs run, or how professional they are, or if they're pretending to play business. You don't know any of that.
Yeah. And look, I've had my own kind of like, like unbelievably negative experiences in terms of where I thought we were as an industry, and seeing the reality firsthand. And, there's a lot of, we've had all the news stories, coverage in the Washington Post and Bloomberg, I think it is now, about, TSM, right? Highest valuated esports org. And you've got the CEO just, going around shouting in people's faces, demeaning people. There's like 2 bullying investigations around it, people leaving in droves. They're jammed up with a, constructive dismissal lawsuit from one of their employees as well, I think. And it's like, I know when I first started going to like team houses and stuff, I was appalled. I was absolutely appalled at what these, young, like say, the young adults, and I think they're all vulnerable in some way. There's an aspect of it we don't talk about in esports, which is kind of a lot of the oil in the machine is a product of unsupportive environments. I could sit you down with 10 esports competitors, and probably I want to say 6 or 7 of them, their parents weren't very supportive of what they wanted to do. They've had some, negative experiences in their life, or they've had a traumatic experience in their life, like suffering Olaf Meister, suffer a traumatic injury, and suddenly you're not allowed to be a sports athlete. And you enter into esports with like this bag of like negativity. And it's super important that you land right. And in America in particular, they don't land right. They end up in a team house surrounded by a bunch of other misfits that maybe don't have the emotional maturity to support each other or help each other. And they're being run by very callous staff. That's my experience. I think one of the reasons why I like people like you coming into the space is you represent a bit of a sea change in where organizations' priorities lie.
Yeah. I thank you, and I humbly agree. Jason Lake gave me a quote that I love. He said something to the effect of, Edward's our mental coach, our nutritionist, our team dad, businessman, and the person you want in the room. And I think you and I have to also take a step back and say, if we want to be in this industry really long term, we have to acknowledge that 6 months is 2 years in esports.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I've worked for big corporations, and they are slow moving machines, and government and universities are even slower moving machines. Esports is Sonic the Hedgehog moving speeds, right? Like, it's cruising. And when I look at these orgs and what they're trying to do, and the turnover and the growth, and I think sometimes we have to take a step back and go, we're learning. The Me Too movement hit esports like 18 months to 24 months after it hit most of society.
Yeah.
And I was kind of sitting there at 100 Thieves looking around, and we didn't do anything that I felt like I had to announce necessarily to Nate or Jacob or anybody. But I kind of sat there watching, feeling like we have to protect this. We have to take care of ourselves. And you see guys like Nadeshot doing a good job of that now, and how they manage themselves and surrounding themselves with the right people so that they're heading in a direction that they can sustain what they're doing. It's going to be a long journey, and we have a lot more learning to do. I gave a keynote to high schoolers at Oakland University recently here in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And the day before I went to Abu Dhabi, and they kind of were asking, what's the number one thing we can do? And the takeaway for everybody in the room was, we can treat each other better. That was their takeaway from all the talk about health and wellness and performance and money and the organizations and job opportunities. Their biggest takeaway is we need to take better care of each other. So by the time that Ilya, Monesi, who's only 17, by the time he's an old man like me, and his kids are playing, or he's watching the next generation at that point, I think we'll see a huge shift. You and I, you in particular, you were in the ocean before the wave came anywhere near the shore.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm Gen 2. I'm Gen 2 esports as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see it, I think, from there. And I've been in the industry for more than 6 years full time. And there's not many that are in my modalities that can say that at all. So I've been around for a long time for myself too, but I'm seeing a shift, but it's going to take us more time. I can't get into the servers, the local servers, and make sure that the girls and women that are in there aren't being spoken to negatively, or that homophobia or racism isn't flourishing in a Call of Duty room or something, like that. Those things are going to have to take time and technology, and people are going to have to care about them.
Yeah, I think there's lots of stuff where I go back and forth on this issue. I think there are certainly some problems. I think the reason why a lot of them seem to be operating in a gaming space, or that's the perception of people from outside of that space, which isn't to dispute anyone's experiences, but I think we all know that if you give someone anonymity and access, and people will be assholes to each other. I mean, we know that from a psychological standpoint. It's sort of
most of the killings on Earth happen in the name of God.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's out of love.
Yes.
Every person that's religious will tell you that their religion's based out of love.
Yeah, so, we do. We're a strange species like that. And
we are, but we're talking about people that are hurt. Hurt people are hurting people.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about. So when I see it, and you and I have a common interest in Buddhism and in some of the spirituality components. When I see that, what I hear, and it's not just my psych education, what I hear is somebody that's hurting and is confused and trying to figure it out. That doesn't mean that I believe my belief system has to be instilled on everyone else's, or else that means they're injured or something, right? But I hear people that are in pain and struggling, and when you're playing games that are frustrating and you're sitting there, it's difficult, especially if you're not getting what you want. That's a tough thing to navigate. So I understand why people take it out on each other. They just need to learn how to take better care of themselves. I
wrote an article about this a long time ago, and again, like a lot of things I say, people are never ready to even explore the ideas. It was a deeply unpopular article at the time, but I was talking about how a lot of the negativity stems from video games and competition as catharsis. And how I related it to was, I knew a lot of guys that had terrible jobs. They worked on building sites with really over-aggressive macho foremen that would just be in their ear. They didn't like them. They would just be essentially, workplace bullying, but it's a building site. You're getting paid cash in hand. So there's no fucking HR department. You know what I mean? And they would put up with that 5 days a week. And then when the weekend came around, whether it was football, whether it was rugby, they would throw themselves into their sports, looking for a fight, looking for somewhere to channel the aggression they wanted to bestow upon that guy, right? And in gaming, obviously, think about what it's like to be typically it's teenagers that engage in all this negative bullshit. But none of this, what I'm saying, by the way, is to excuse it, but it's to point out that there are people that they shout and scream and say reprehensible things, but they've got a school bully they can't shake, or their stepdad gives them a leathering on the weekend, and they're just looking for something to distract from them. And then when the games don't deliver the dopamine hits of success, they're like, "This is the last fucking refuge. This was it for me.
I'm supposed to be having fun here."
Yeah, and I'm not having fun. Yeah. Someone is fucking with my fun. Yeah. So I think, so I wrote that article, and everyone was like, you're basically being an apologist for the worst types of internet behavior. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. But thanks for reading, I guess. But
it doesn't excuse it, but it might be one of the reasons why it's happening.
Well, we all want it to stop, right? We all want it to stop. So we have to identify root causes and bring in models and systems that, that discourage but also we need to, find, like increased communication tools and things like this in games generally help. For years, League of Legends are like, we don't want voice chat in our game. I'm like, this is a super fast-paced, team-based game, and no one can talk to each other. What do you expect? People are going to lose their fucking minds.
Yeah, you can't play it right if you're not communicating.
Yeah, like, you get killed while you're typing. That's it. Game over at that point. Yeah,
game over.
Yeah, totally. But on a more serious topic, yeah, I think because esports essentially is what the it still is in many ways what the early internet was, and that is that you come in, you can be whoever you want to be, you create an avatar of yourself in a digital space. You only have to reveal what you want to reveal, you only have to engage with what you want to engage with. You can keep anything secret or you can disclose everything, and it can't be linked back to a real world physical presence. I think that's one of the great things about esports, because by definition it has to be inclusive if those are the rules. But the other problem is, obviously, all the negative behaviors I've talked about can truly flourish in an environment like that, as we see on, social media platforms.
Well, it feeds a version of their ego. It feeds a narrative, and what we are egotistically is the acceptance of stories from others. So if I say something outrageous and you respond to me and treat me a certain way, then I'm able to be that person. And that's obviously a dangerous thing long term, and doesn't teach them much about who they are internally. That's why they have a tough time with it when they take it off the server. Yeah. It's the same thing with road rage, and then being in the grocery store. You're going to drive your vehicle different than you're going to drive your grocery cart, different than you're going to meet someone in person. So it's I don't know. It's going to change with time. I believe that we're just young in this. We'll mature out of it. This is going to be the first generation. My son, I have a 9 and a 5 and a newborn sons. This will be the first generation that's being recorded. And I'm not trying to like tweet photos of them all day or something, but they're going to have an imprint that I didn't have. I had Facebook in college, but we don't have video of me when I was 15 playing football or something. So that's those conversations that I was having with those teammates weren't recorded, and we had growing pains as teams. Everybody goes through that.
Yeah. What do you think about the structure of esports, in the sense that because you have to, there's more than just your skills on the server. Like, I think every player now, to some degree, is a brand, and they have to engage with a public-facing aspect of their job that might actually be the vector through which all the negativity, all the anxiety, all the destructive elements sort of come through. Back in my day, obviously you didn't have to do that. There wasn't even social media. There wasn't even YouTube.
Right.
You didn't have to worry about being a brand. You just had to worry about, can you pop heads? And
it's a big important topic. It's a big important topic, because if they, I pick a player. Give me any player I've ever worked with. I'm happy to talk about it. I've worked with JKS for 6+ years. Him and I have never not spoke since I started way back with the Renegades. Him and I have been working together the whole run.
Let me see. I'll just make sure I've got, because I did write the list down in my little Word document here.
It's a good list, but even right now with G2 is a prime example in a sense, right? Because we have such a. So I'll kind of walk back for a second. So you have an individual person, you have a gamer, you have a team, and you have an org. And you can see how those kind of will transcend from an internal aspect to an external facing aspect, right? And so that's really what my dissertation PhD work is on, if we wanted to just simplify it.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at that, if we're only focused on Twitter, and I tweet, I can tell you how many followers I got. I'll share this video gladly, and I'll accept all the followers that come with, hopping on a podcast with Richard Lewis. That's cool. But if I define myself through that, if I spend too much time in that identity and I don't spend enough time alone, or if I don't spend enough time working on my skills as a practitioner, as an athlete, whatever I am, if I don't spend enough time with my team, if I don't find ways to balance those things. So in the same way that any person, Justin's a good example because Justin's far more intrinsic.
Mm-hmm.
Not tweeting. I'm telling him, Justin, you got to tweet. Send a tweet today, Justin. Share the photo, Justin. You know, I took the photo of him holding the trophy. Those are my photos, right? And he said, "Will you send me that photo?" Yeah, Justin, I'll send it. You're smiling. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well. So here's an example for you, because I did a video about it, and I think he don't think he liked it. A lot of people don't like it when I express opinions, and I hope people also understand. I know you get this, but it's a good place to say it. I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, I'm incredibly empathetic to everything pro players go through, but when I enter into a sports punditry role, I'm not talking about them as people. I'm solely talking about their performances and you know, who the athlete version of themselves. So, like, I've been very critical of JKS, you know, for example, his career. I think he's been an underachiever for me, because I've seen him at his peak, and then I saw how he languished at complexity and then couldn't get back to the team and blah, blah. We'll probably talk about that in the G2 segment. But, you know, it's not like I dislike him. It's not that it's not like I have any, animus towards him or anything like that. I'm literally talking about almost like the numbers. I'm just talking about the numbers. I'm just talking about.
We know, as working closely with gamers, we know that it's difficult to hear things that don't make us feel good. I'll just throw that one out of the way.
Yeah, I get it.
Even a step further than that, it's difficult to separate the behaviors from the person. Mm. And so if you and I are on a team and we've got 3 other guys and I'm our entry and I stink and you're our IGL, you're a Blame F caliber IGL and Blame wouldn't say this, so let me remove that analogy. But if you're my IGL and you say, "Man, Edward, you piece of shit, like, how come you keep throwing your molly there and you're screwing us and you're util and blah, blah, blah." Like, I'm going to have a difficult time removing myself from the behavior of throwing the molly. So I'm going to lose the message within that. Right. And so sure. I think that's a difficult thing. It's difficult to hear anything from us, even good news. It's difficult to remove the good behavior. "Oh, you guys played so well." Well, there's an element of that has to do with them shooting, right? And following orders and doing things that don't have to do with maybe their emotional self. Right? Maybe there's something that's separate from that. And so we have to look at just the behavior aspect of it. So it's difficult to separate those things, just like taking criticism from anyone's kind of difficult. In terms of Justin, I would say, well, it sounds like you have really high expectations of him. And so do I. And so does he. And I believe that he can be and is one of the best in the world. And so if at times there's been any expectation that's not been met, then I would say, well, there's been high expectations. So I would kind of leave it to that. And I have, not from him, I can't recall a time of him ever speaking about you critically at all.
No, probably not. I mean, this is the other thing. You kind of fall into 2 areas when you're a pundit with players. Basically, players either just disregard anything you say because they have a good understanding of it's all just fucking noise at the end of the day. Who cares about Richard Lewis's opinion? I'm not there when you're training. I'm not there with you at tournaments. I'm just essentially a fan with a bigger mouth, right? So they have that mindset. And then, there's the others who are like very precious about the critique, and they have a tendency, they in almost childlike innocence, they must assume you dislike them. I've had loads of pros down the years message me, "Why do you hate me?" And I'm going to tell
I'm sure you have. Yeah. And like, some of my players will read Reddit. Justin's not a Reddit reader. Yeah. You know what I mean? Justin does ignore the noise.
He should read it. It'd be a great ego. They love him over there.
Well, that's the thing. Him and I are steadfast on trying not to be too high or too low. We had a 6-year plan together, and we really have kind of walked this line together. And when you say how do you support players? Justin's one of those players. And I think all of my guys feel this way. Even a guy like Config, who I haven't worked with, I didn't work with while he was on Australis, other than him bouncing me a note here or there. But even when I bump into him, boot and all on the crutch in Abu Dhabi, it's just nothing but hugs and happiness between us. And we experienced, I would say, less success than Justin and I have together. So
here's the example. Ethan, obviously 100 Thieves, moved from CSGO over to Valorant. So he was changing games, changing disciplines, and obviously was getting a lot of criticism from the community. I think everyone's still a bit tribal in esports, so if you leave one game for another.
Oh, from going from Red Sox to the Yankees.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. And so, but I also, he tweeted some things out, and what I noticed was over in Valorant world, perhaps certainly in North America, perhaps more so in Counter-Strike world, the players seem to be, they get super upset if they ever get criticized for having a bad game by anyone. And also they feel absolutely compelled to be doing that whole social media thing. I tweet here, tweet there, engage with it, bickering with people on Twitter. And it's like, I don't know. I think players, when I see them doing it, I'm like you've already won the game. You're not like some journalist in the trenches getting death threats from 14-year-olds because I wrote an opinion piece in 2015 they didn't like. You're making tens of thousands of dollars every month. You've got your fans greatly outweigh your detractors, and you just don't need nothing good comes from social media. It should just do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because Ethan in particular is one guy I've seen where it's like, you know what, homie, I just take the win. Just take the win.
And he does a lot of that. I guess for starters, I'm not familiar with the exact one you're talking about. I know Ethan really well. I know Kelly well. I know Katsu a little bit. And what I can say about him is he's one of the kindest, best teammates. I've never heard anyone offer me criticism about him.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, I'm not really sure actually.
Well, do you have general rules then for social media for players? Because you just said you do encourage people to participate in the brand aspect of stuff as well, obviously, but social media is a very tricky thing to negotiate at the best of times. So do you have some general advice when you're working with pros that need
advice? Sure. Maybe not standardized advice. So some guys really do rely on it. A guy like Sam, who I worked with, Sam, he needs to be on social media and reinforcing his brand. A guy like Asuna, Peter would tell me right away, he'd be like, Edward tweet, right after the dub, to make sure that you get the most impressions. So I'm, maybe I don't want them to be overly focused on it. How about that? How about have some idea of intention about what you're doing with it? We're not trying to do it in a manner to, to be hostile towards others, but I guess I just haven't incurred a lot of moments where it was like a player did something that we needed to retract online. We talk about being good people and how to navigate that externally. Trying to think of what player I've had that has been kind of difficult. The one for Ethan, I'm kind of excited to see it. I'm kind of excited to ask him which one you're talking about, actually.
Yeah,
so
it was
really sure.
just to help you with that. I think he got upset over again. I think somebody had said he had a bad game or something. It was a caster, something like that.
It probably sucks to hear if you had a bad game, and he's had bad games, and everybody's had a bad game. So I don't think. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes we handle that well. Sometimes we don't. There's pros. Kobe Bryant famously called up Charles Barkley and cussed him out one night about something he said, and then the next morning he called him back and said, hey, you're probably right. I kind of had a stinker of a game. So I don't know. Maybe he had a bad game and he was unhappy about it. I can see that being a possibility. But when I met Ethan, he was on a nice trajectory of becoming a very mature man. And I think for his age and where he is in life, I think, and a lot of the guys around him, especially the young guys, what I've heard from them is that they aspire to be a lot like him, but both on and off the server. So maybe he was pissed off with something somebody said. That can happen, I guess, to any of us.
One of the things I've noticed as well, where a lot of problems stem from with pros, is that their self-esteem levels seem tied to their gameplay and general status. And it can be a very poisonous relationship. where the ego kind of becomes, you can't be happy as an individual when you're not playing away from the server, away from the team, because people are saying you're bad, or, you're hard stuck in a particular rank and everyone's like mocking you. Like, why can't you break into 9K MMR? You shouldn't be on a pro team, and things like this. And I've seen some people go down some really dark fucking, down some dark rabbit holes with that. Is that anything you've encountered or have any thoughts about?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. And yes, of course. I'll always hear from a gamer, if I could just get off to a hot start and Counter-Strike, if I could win that pistol and then have a clean second round, and then we're good to go. So we talk a lot about being conditional, because that's really what you're talking about, is being conditional. I'll feel this way if this happens. I will define myself as success if I experience this outcome. And we don't want to define ourselves based on our output. That's kind of a classic thing in corporate America now, is to try to get around some of these ideas of how do we get people not to feel like their value is only based on their output? How am I valuable beyond just my output? And that's tough to do, especially if you're tabbing and checking out your stats every single round, or if you're paying attention to all that. And, you have to have such security in your process, in your day-to-day, in your life, in yourself, that you're not defining yourself just by your outcomes and your ability to produce.
What about when people, because loads of pros complain about this, and that is that when there are definitely pro players who, when they're having a bad game, they will alter how they approach the game to try and stat pad, essentially, because they're worried about the public backlash.
Yeah, I mean, if you're at that point on a team, you're not one of the elite teams. I haven't been on a team like that in a while. So if we're already at that point, you've got a lot of work to do. That's like intervention type level, because you're not playing for each other at all. So we have to go back to the drawing board and have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with me. What
does a team intervention look like? What would it look like?
A team intervention coming off of something like that, where people are now not following instructions and not doing the same role, would look like the 5 of us, or 6 of us in that case of CS, and the coach and maybe a player manager or 2 sitting in a room and closed door and going around in a circle and hashing it all out.
Because I've heard
the cup.
Yeah. Because I've heard from other orgs, they do these things. Like, I can't remember. There was some like weird name one org used for it, like an honesty. It can't just have been session.
There's a lot of different ways to call it, but it's usually like empty the cup, empty the backpack kind of thing. It doesn't always go really well. Sometimes it's a bumpy ride. There's a good reason why you need a practitioner in a room. Yeah, not just a performance coach. And I don't say that with disrespect to people that call themselves that. That is a practitioner role. That's where you need someone that has the experience to sit in and almost counsel or become an ombudsman and help navigate this difficult conversation. They need to be able to understand that change is really difficult. They have to be willing to sit in discomfort. I'm not scared of being uncomfortable with people or navigating uncomfortable conversations, So you have to be willing to sit and be honest with each other about that. And sometimes it doesn't go perfectly. I actually, I don't think he'll mind me saying this. I rode in a van with NAF the other night on the way home after we ended up beating Liquid in the title. I rode in a van with NAF and Josh all the way back to Dubai for a flight. And we were talking about, because I worked with him very shortly on Renegades. He kind of came in and Renegades fell into Renegades, is probably a better way to put it. And then elevated out of Renegades and kind of with Liquid. And here we are all these years later. In a van together in the UAE, and in talking with him, he said, we're just on these like roads of maturity and figuring these things out about being ourselves and people and pros, and it's so interesting to kind of hear him at that point, and now without talking to him hardly at all, like 5 years later, in those gaps of trying to kind of navigate and figure this out. And he said, I remember the conversation you had in the hotel with us when it was my last match with Renegades. And I kind of said to him, it sounds like you don't want to be here. And he said, well, yeah, I don't want to be here. you know? And I said, well, then go. And he said, can I? I said, yeah, Keith, go ahead. Are you done being on our team? And he said, yeah, I think so. I don't think I'll play here again. And I looked at the boys and I said, all right, guys, say goodbye to Keith. And we kind of stopped arguing about the last map and losing to Mouse Sports or whatever. And we kind of said, okay, well, all right, let's go back to being people again. You know, like it doesn't have to be this hard. We don't have a match tomorrow. You know, we're all just trying to kind of figure out what the heck we're doing here and how to get ahead. But in the instance where we're not trusting each other or we're not telling each other or working together, that's not a team that's in the top 12.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's good to know as well, though, that there's like, again, but when players run teams, you know, I don't want to use the phrase like lunatics running the asylum or whatever, but I mean, when you see these player-driven teams, they are typically disasters. I mean, for real. There's been a lot of, and again, I'll be bringing this up in the G2 segment. I'm conscious of time, so we are going to get there. But you know, obviously, there's been a lot of teams. G2 in the past haven't been one of them, where it's like the assumption is they're player-run teams. Obviously, no one's really sure. I know there've been a few teams down the years that were definitely player-run teams where managers just didn't intervene at all, and basically whoever was on the roster was essentially the behest of either the IGL or whoever was deemed to be, you know, the golden boy of the org. You know, think, for example, Nifty over at Envious or whatever. And these environments are just terrible for everybody. Like,
and it puts a great weight on them. And I'm close with Noah. It puts a great responsibility on their shoulders when they're given that type of reins and autonomy. Even when we want that, sometimes we don't know what we're asking for. So it can be multifaceted.
So, okay, here's one word for you. Drugs. I'm a big fan of them myself, have been down the years. But obviously in esports, we've been sort of clumsily negotiating what type of rules we have around it. This all sort of stemmed famously from the Launders interview of Semphis when he was, you know, playing for Cloud9, and he said, we've all been popping Adderall. I know North American esports, particularly Call of Duty and Halo, lesser extent League of Legends and CSGO, but it's still there. In NA, there's been an Adderall problem for sure. But
we were basically given it. I was a college athlete. We were basically told to take it.
Yeah, I mean,
it was in everything. Methamphetamines. It was in everything. And I'm not 80 years old. I mean, I'm talking in the 2000s.
Yeah, when I was living out there, dude, like everyone was like Richard, you just got to get on this shit. It's a wonder drug, and I'm like, a wonder drug.
It's a nootropic. It's a nootropic. Yeah. So it's a brain altering chemical substance. You know,
sure.
So is caffeine, so is nicotine. You know, but
obviously,
stimulant. It's a high stimulant.
Yeah, but obviously with Adderall, right? I mean, like a lot of amphetamines. You know, I was a big speed freak when I was younger. I used to, I essentially paid my way through college by dealing speed, and used to take it a lot. Used to be in a band as well, so you know, late nights. But you know, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it seemed I've seen. It's no coincidence that we've had these very high-profile meltdowns with some players and influencers that have clearly been abusing Adderall, and there's definitely an Adderall issue. But what do you think about like where would we tackle drug use in esports from? Should we be doing dope testing? Should it be something the org tackles? Do we need to explore this as a potential problem at all?
I think that's a really good question. You know, I haven't been faced with that question too frequently, to be transparent, and I haven't seen, and I've kept my eyes open. I worked in some industries where it's tested and all these type of things. Right now I think it's going to be tough. First and foremost, we're talking about esports and it's a global game. So right there makes it very difficult just in general, because a prescription drug in one country is not legal in another, not the same name, not the same ingredients, different chemicals. So I'm an American practitioner. The United States is accountable for consuming roughly 50% of all the prescription drugs on earth. You know, I have never, I can't prescribe in my practice. I'm not licensed to, not that I would. It's a complex topic. You know, I'm not really sure how to answer it quite quite honestly. I believe there's probably a place where we would have to make space for people to be able to have access to things that their doctors and them believe that they should be taking, as long as they're legal. So I err on the side of, kind of being liberal in the sense of allowing someone to do what they want with their bodies.
That's my take on it too. But when it comes to the performance issue, it's like what's super interesting is, like, after that story broke, ESL like sort of scrambled to get themselves a little PR win, and they started swabbing
we've got
players.
Progressive. And we've got riots in LA, right? We've got some progressive communities, so I think you'll see action taken at some point. I'm really not sure how they'll do it, because I don't think screening them on site or something is going to be an avenue that the orgs agree with, and they'll eventually have to sign off on that. Kind of coming full circle to what we were talking about fairly early in our conversation about the players and kind of how they're treated, and like the players associations and those bodies, the governing bodies, that there needs to be more unity and work, and they need to be more vocal and kind of a bigger pillar in some of this too. And I've heard that from a lot of players, like, wow, I wish we had some representation. And I know there is. I don't mean to demean them.
But listen, I'll do it for you. I'll absolutely demean them. The Counter-Strike Professional Players Association, it's now gone through essentially 3 iterations of leadership, and I think every single, or the first iteration was obviously people that wanted to use it as a segue into player agency, where they would make more money than you would ever running an association by design. Then they handed it over to a body of pre-selected professional players, ensuring that only the top tier teams' interests were being represented, while smaller teams, some of those people weren't even considered for membership if you were in a tier 2 or a tier 3 team.
You're far more familiar than I am. My experience just has been a vacancy. I'll be at a tournament, and maybe and
that's where we're at now. That's like kind of V3. Yeah.
Oh, really? Because I'm kind of looking around sometimes, feeling like there's no representation for the players, other than, the orgs are taking care of them, and that's a good thing that the orgs are doing good and taking care of the players, but
also not always.
Of course, of course, not always. And there's horror stories, from.
Just broadly, an organization and the players' interests, they can only align so far down the road, right? And then eventually there's going to be a divergence where org's going to want to save money or take a bigger cut of a deal, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, or just has to get rid of a player so it doesn't have their future in their best interest.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
I don't blame an owner for saying, well, I held on to that player and traded him at the last minute or something because it was financially viable for me. And if I said to that owner, do you think that would be best literally for that person and for their career? The owner might say, well, no, but Edward, I'm running a business here. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, don't run a business, just run a daycare and care about the players only, right? So there needs to be different agents in the room for them. I feel that we need them surrounded by a good group of agencies.
Yeah. I was talking about that last night on another podcast, actually, that basically like the esports agents think they're doing the best work for their client if they can get an exorbitant salary for them, and it's like, yeah, there's definitely some other stuff you can be focused on.
My business manager says that's what we need to do. We need to go to the agencies and have me helping them and working with their players, because that's what they need. They need support. They need health and wellness and performance support.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do it. Let's do the G2.
Sure.
Let's get in there. First of all, I want to ask you, before you joined G2, did you know you were going to be joining G2? Did you have any aspirations to go and work at G2? Were they a tantalizing prospect for you, or was it just something that happened?
I had been in talks with G2 for years. I had a nice relationship with Yuli over there, and
I know,
yeah. So I had already had kind of a nice relationship, and then when Justin went over there, then it was kind of like, all right, well, if we're going to ever pull the trigger, I may as well. Further that dialogue, and Yuli was happy to bring me on, and happy to be there.
What were your thoughts about them before you joined?
Well,
broadly as an organization and as a team.
Well, I knew the external viewing of them, right? I knew the media viewing, and I knew the players that were there. I was familiar with Hunter and Nico and Monesi and these names. I was familiar with that, and Kenny and all that, some of their history and kind of the memes around them not having success in the last 3 years, and seeing an elevation in the meme, if you will.
Yep.
But in terms of an org, I viewed it as a really proper org, an org that seemingly from the outside looked like they were well run, and I didn't hear complaints about kind of their administrative carry-ons and their operational carry-ons, and they seem to be, I don't want to say a standard, but a high-profile European org. Maybe the premier org in a lot of ways.
Yeah. There was a lot of turmoil around the organization just sort of ahead of this. Carlos, who's obviously another one of these generation of player CEOs who have created incredible brands for themselves, like Nade Shot, like guys like Hex as well before him. There's others. It's still early in the day for me. Brain's not working. But, he essentially built G2 up from nothing.
Yeah.
And then error of judgment, the internet doing what the internet does, and there being pressure applied to his board members and investors. They basically made a collective decision. The best thing for him would be to leave. And for a lot of people, I can understand it sort of pragmatically, like from a business perspective. I think it was a silly tweet to make, and the doubling down didn't help. But equally, I think now that we've got like a month or so free and clear of it, can probably agree it was a bit of an overreaction. And so I wanted to ask you, you're coming in while kind of the fallout from this is happening. And I wanted to ask how much it affected, first of all, any trepidation you might have had, but also, whether or not this did filter down to the CSGO players and impact on them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of came in the door as Carlos was exiting. It was almost like that few-day window. I think within like a 3-day window I came in. And so, and I don't know him, and he doesn't know me other than, either what he's heard about me or read about me, and same with me to him. In a sense, I both am able to be empathetic of what he had to go through and losing, what he had built up, and I have respect for what he had built up and how hard he worked. And I don't think that any mistake that he made or could make would remove the fact that he did something amazing building the org. And I think even yesterday or today, he tweeted that it'll always be his baby or something when he kind of put out a statement about something. And that's absolutely accurate. And at the same time, I didn't view, although he was very much G2, and it was very much like reflective of him in a lot of ways, how when Nade Shot goes to the golf course and you see him, it's like seeing 100 Thieves at the golf course, right? At the same time, what the tweet he put out and what he did, that action, I didn't view that as a G2 action. To me, that didn't have anything to do with Yuli or the esports department or something. So I didn't feel like that was really a reflection of them at all. And then hearing how they felt about it, didn't make me feel like they had anything to do with it, of course. So I wasn't really moved too much by that, other than to notice that they're in a time of reevaluation, reassessing, and they admitted that as well, and some directional change, and that made it that much more apparent that they both needed me, and it was a perfect time for me to step in and see if I could kind of help them change that ship a little bit.
And did you know, like, were the players impacted? Were they talking about it? Because I don't know what degree of relationship they had with Carlos.
They all have a relationship with him, but I don't know that it really had that much of an impact on them. They didn't seem like that was really. These men are pretty focused. They're pretty focused on what they're doing in their life, and it was something. It was certainly, hell, any company you're at, if the CEO gets removed, that's a big deal, right? Especially if it's a big public company. So obviously it was something, but it didn't deter them or make them feel like they didn't want to be a part of the project or something.
So what were your perceptions coming into a team that hadn't won a trophy since 2017?
Well, I assume that there must be some performance issue in terms of anxiety. They told me early on that if they could only perform like they practiced, that seemed to be the theme that I kind of heard before I met with any of the players, that we seem to have a gap between our practices and our stage matches. That was probably the main thing. Of course, there's, always curiosities, and when you lose, they're amplified. How those inner working relationships are between people. So I heard some things, and then when I came on, I heard some of the tired cliches about some of the players, and I get a message about this guy or that guy saying, hey, look out for this with this guy or something. But like I always do, I kind of said, all right, well, I'll go see what I see, and
Yeah.
And then I'll just help them, and we'll go in, and here we are.
Did you have any, with those tired cliches, so you just went in complete blank slate, let's see what I find? You didn't go in with any preconceptions or suspicions or hunches?
If I was on the O.J. Simpson jury trial and they said, are you familiar with the juice? I'd say, yeah, I'm familiar with the juice, right? Like, yeah, I saw the news, I'm familiar with it. So, I'm plugged in. I've been in Counter-Strike for years before I started working with these guys. So it's tough not to have some form of concept, but you don't know someone until you sit with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not interested in accepting just the external idea of something. I'm a researcher. I'm a thinker. I'm a student. I like to look at the data and really sit with it and figure out what I'm working with. And even if someone is a tyrant, and I don't have anything near that on this roster, but I've worked with some tough guys in the past that were difficult to work with. Even those guys still need help. And I say guys intentionally because I work with men, just to clarify, so I don't get myself in trouble. But the men that I work with are all trying to become better. So no, I didn't walk in allowing any of the things that I had heard to cloud my ability to help them.
Yeah. Because obviously one of the tired cliches is about Nico, right? Now, it's sort of interesting because there was a thing that happened. And again, this is kind of either side of your time, right? So for a long, long time, Nico has been accused of being, because he's a star player, one of the best players ever to touch the game, he gets what he wants. We all, like when he was at FaZe, him and Carrigan had a dispute. Carrigan is the one that goes. Nico is essentially the guy that pushed for that behind the scenes. This is now public knowledge. Nico gets the G2. Obviously it doesn't. I think Hunter's a fantastic player and certainly worth a spot in G2, but for my money, and worth a spot on a top tier team. But obviously that perception isn't helped by the nepotistic angle of it all, of them being related. Then obviously as well, you had the Xtaz thing where he did a joke tweet where he's holding up a butter knife to Xtaz and he's holding me hostage to dismiss some of those rumors. And then once Xtaz, the coach, left, he said, yeah, some of the players just weren't receptive to my ideas. And everyone's going, it's fucking Nico again, isn't it? So that didn't help. So, listen, I know probably like I'm a world weary journalist. I know probably you wouldn't say if it was true, but I'll ask you, how influential is Nico over this team in terms of dictating the roster, where he wants to play, et cetera, et cetera?
So I'll start off by saying I've been there 60 days.
Okay, fair.
So let me start off there.
But in a tournament environment, which is very illuminating.
Sure,
so.
But I'll still answer the question. I have seen Nico over a difficult little tournament in Copenhagen that we had, some learning curve as a group together, and then how we rebounded and won the title just now. I couldn't be more proud, and there's nothing that I would want to change with him in terms of how he treats his teammates or the way that he's conducted himself with the teammates. I don't know the conversations he's had with management in the past or something about his desires for rosters, but I can tell you that when I've pressed him about how he feels about his teammates and their ability, when I've pressed him, he's made me feel like he has 100% confidence in each one of those guys. So, and I know that if you ask them, you ask Hooksy or obviously ask Nemanja, who's family. So of course that makes it more difficult too, right?
Yeah.
But if you ask them, he would tell you he has 100% faith in them and trust in them. And we would not have won if he didn't. So we're not a championship team where he didn't even win the MVP trophy.
Yeah.
Right. He did his job. We asked a top 5 player in the world just to do his job and carry us emotionally at times, and he did it. I mean, he still performed fantastically, but in support of players, I've got no clue on rosters.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't tell me anyway, because they want me to be able to be a practitioner for each guy. They don't want me to walk in and go, "Hey, I heard a rumor you're on a chopping block, buddy." So
fair. So yeah, I mean, because look, I do think Nico's gets a terrible time of it, honestly. I haven't
had a player. I'm sorry to interrupt. I have not had a player that I started working with where who I worked with them, I got as much vitriol as I did with him. And it actually surprised me a little bit. And it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't too negative, but they were kind of like, more or less like, this guy won't work with you, or this guy won't give you the time of day, or this guy won't respect you, or something like that. And about 2 days in, him and I are in the weight room together alone for the next week or 2 weeks, and I'm his workout partner, and we're calling each other by our childhood names. And he couldn't be more open to ideas or feedback or direction. And for a guy of his caliber to be that open to it, you can take all the rumors and that's not the man that I've met. And I'm a pretty good judge of these type of characters.
I knew for real there had been a change. I talked to him at an after party after they lost to Navi. And obviously he had quite a prominent missed shot in it, which could have changed the outcome of the game when they were on a Deagle round. And, a lot of people have really were blaming him for the loss, even though he was like the second best player, I want to say it, at Stockholm after Simple. And it's like he played lights out. They wouldn't even have been in the final probably if it hadn't have been for him. And we saw him at the after party, and, old Nico would have been, fuck my teammates for a little bit. Like, he did play with some guys. He had no right being anywhere near to them. They were just so far in terms of quality. But he wasn't. He was really like down on himself and just saying, I just want to find that extra, I want to find that little bit extra so I can get my guys over the line. It was like an incredibly mature response to a very difficult loss. There was even rumors circulating at the event, which I don't think were true, but like, because after he missed the shot, he like ran off stage and people said he threw up, but I don't think that was true. But that's like a little rumor. That's a bit of
doesn't
mythology.
Seem like that kind of dude. He's the kind of man that holds his beer down just fine.
Yeah. But like they said, the adrenaline hit him or something because he'd missed and he had to run off the stage and be sick and then come back. That was like a little bit of mythology some of the admins were putting out there, I think, at the event. But no, I don't think that's true. But I mean, the bottom line is, I think, the community's perception of him doesn't align with the reality, I think.
Well, and we're also capable of growth. I mean, I've only known
it's definitely been true in the past few
months. But right, like you go through things and you learn from them, and hopefully you grow from them. So I know I'm meeting him at a more mature, perhaps, space than he might have been, 5 years ago or so.
And obviously as well, you've got an interesting disparity in the team in terms of age. And you've got at one end, you've got an IGL that's in their late 20s. And you've got a young star just, proclaimed rookie of the year. And so obviously I imagine very different requirements from you.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, Ilya and I meditate. We practice biofeedback, which is assessing your heart rate variability with your breath work.
Okay.
We practice our English together and work on communication skills. So those are fundamental things that we do. We do a lot of other things as well, but those are fundamental. Whereas someone like Nico, we're focused more on physical health, interpersonal relationships on the team, how he communicates, performance, maybe performance nutrition. So yeah, back to that word holistic, right? Meeting them where they are. And so it's not even just age. I think Ilya will probably be more interested in meditation when he's 27 than powerlifting. I think, Nicola will probably be more interested in working out than guided imagery. Teach their own. We all kind of have our health practices that are more of our strengths. So, but age does play a role, sure.
And obviously as well, it's kind of like with Munazi, a very strange and unique situation in the sense that he's young. I think he's shown incredible poise and maturity, based around the type of vitriol that's aimed at him, because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it's a very tense time in terms of how we're working together as a community to come through something that's like, this is like the kind of first time we've really had to face anything like this in esports.
I'm 41 years old, and this to me just doesn't seem like it's real. And I say that as an American who could be pointed out some of the hypocrisy in that, because in my lifetime we've attacked plenty of countries.
Sure.
So let me put that one out there. But to see it kind of put to us like this, and what I'll say to that on behalf of Ilya is that Ilya had nothing to do with this, right?
Of course, right?
Ilya doesn't want this. Ilya is a very peaceful and loving young man.
But obviously relocating as well. I mean, living on the road essentially.
So that he can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that he can continue to provide for his family and for himself, and take the journey in his life that he wants to take. I'm not sure what else anyone would want of him, other than to go do this. And it's a difficult thing for him to discuss, because it's painful to consider what's happening. I know how empathetic of a human he is, so it's a difficult thing to kind of navigate, especially at 17. I can't imagine
exactly
to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fucking hot mess at 17, so you know what I mean?
To travel the world and then have my country invade their neighbor, and then to have people somehow want me to take a stance on that publicly or something, that would be really difficult.
Yeah. And I think Nico's done a great job of being the big brother in that relationship. I mean, that's apparent to everyone that's like ever watched any of their streams or seen how they interact with each other.
He also expects a lot from him. So they have a beautiful brotherhood, but I think everyone kind of treats Ilya like that. We really do kind of surround him and try to give him a family type environment and take really good care of him. And Yuli does that too. I think G2 is doing such a nice job of just making sure that he's well looked after, and they're taking really good care of him for this, all the things that people would have no clue about, when you're in foreign countries, and making sure you're getting paid, and all these different things that you have to do, right? And making sure you're fed and have a place to stay, and they're taking really good care of him.
Obviously, for this tournament, Hooksy had some terrible news that his father had passed away. My understanding is, based on his tweets and what he'd said subsequently, he said goodbye to his family, said he was going to travel. By the time he'd landed, the news was that his father had passed away, which is like, awful.
I can't perfectly agree to that timeline because I don't know, but it was right in that window, right? By the time I got off the plane, that was what I was reading. And I got there just hours after. So it may have happened while he was literally flying.
Yeah.
That's how we started the trip.
My gut reaction when I saw that, because Hooksy's come under so much pressure in terms of community feedback, of which I am also one of those voices that I'll be honest, I still have question marks about his suitability, not as a person, not as a leader, but just overall caliber of player. I won't shirk that responsibility and pretend I never said that. But, my gut reaction when I heard that story was the organization needs to protect him here. and they need to tell him, you're on the first plane back home, go be with your family, we'll work something out.
Yep.
I think if it was one of my players, that's what I would have done.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe some other people feel the same way. Mm-hmm. My read is based on what he said. He didn't want to do that. So I wanted to ask you about that situation.
Oh, yeah, this was 100% his choice.
Okay.
Yeah, the org, as you said, immediately made arrangements for him to head home, immediately lined up replacement players. I was on those texts, so I saw we were already reaching out and had guys ready to get on planes. So we had already made those arrangements. Yeah, and that was our stance on it too. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, well, it's first thing I heard was Yuli, and Yuli said, okay, let's send him home, and we'll get the replacement, no big deal.
Yeah,
we didn't walk into this tournament like we had to win this thing or else we were all going to get fired or something. We walked into this tournament with a much more relaxed kind of attitude as a group of men. So this was already not a high pressure situation for us. So no, any rumor about that's wrong. No, he completely said, I want to stay, and gave us valid reasons and made an argument to stay because there was some pushback against it too. But he promised that that was what he had to do. So we agreed, and then we agreed on his terms in terms of how he would navigate his grief and how we would support him navigating grief and also playing a tournament.
Yeah, and I really can't imagine, I can't really, I don't really have the only frame of reference is, I've gone through a very public grieving process. And when I had to work, I kept on working till my brain broke and I made a fucking idiot of myself in public. With all of the pressure that's been put on to him individually, it is a fantastic achievement to be able to disconnect yourself from those feelings and find the level of focus you need to do to go and do a very high pressure job. I tweeted about it immediately afterwards, even though, there was egg on my face, right? Because some things are just more fucking important than,
Sure.
video games.
This is a guy that was getting criticism publicly, as you stated, and then went from that to having his dad die and led us to the World Blast Championship. I mean, make a movie about this.
Oh yeah, sure. It's hell of a story.
I don't. It doesn't matter what I do in the rest of esports. I can't imagine a scenario where, when I'm reflecting back on my career someday, where I have a story that to me pulls on me quite the way that witnessing him go through this and watching those men do what they did. I just can't imagine a world where it could be trumped. Yeah, I mean, he deserves all the praise he's getting right now.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, he said, at the end that he himself had some doubts about his suitability for the project.
He'd still say that. He's a very smart. He's very self-aware.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He tells me exactly what he's thinking. He'll tell you that he'd probably laugh that I'm wearing yin and yang, and I'll show him the cup that I'm drinking out of when we're reviewing this together. Yeah, I mean, he is pushing. He's pushing, and he's aware of those things. He's aware of the criticism. He's not ignorant to anything, I don't think. He's a pretty aware young man, so that doesn't surprise me at all. But to that point, and I'll say this about anyone I've worked with, and I've won titles in a lot of different games for different orgs, and people are almost surprised after their wedding day or after the day they win a championship, because nothing really changes. I'm still the same person, right? I still have the same problems, or I still have the same insecurities, or I still feel. And so, sometimes when we win, we go, oh my gosh, because we didn't really fully accept ourselves as champions. And I don't know, after the 3 years that Nico just went through, I was going to say Nicola, just experience. I don't know if walking into that match, if you said, all right, do you feel like a champion today? I don't know if it's appropriate to say that we're supposed to feel like that. Am I supposed to feel like I'm a champion every time I walk out the door? I mean, that's not really how life works. So sometimes we get ourselves into these situations and we go, am I worthy enough to experience this? And my guru Ram Dass would say, we're too busy gripping onto our unworthiness. And once you let go of your unworthiness, then you can experience anything. So the focus and the pendulum swinging from experiencing the tragedy to focusing in on what he was doing, obviously are big variables. But at the same time, you don't have to believe that you are completely prepared. We are never prepared in life. I tell that to all my teams. Told that to my League of Legends team, 100 Thieves, before we won the title. We're prepared enough. The Evil Geniuses squad, to win a title, we're prepared enough. You're never going to feel like you're fully prepared. If I give you more time to edit this video, you're going to edit it further. If we have more time to talk, we'll talk about more. We're never going to fully be prepared, but you have to be willing to send it. And you have to do that together. And he did that full send. He wasn't worried. I want him leading our huddle every time for the rest of my life. I mean, it was a full send version. It was a peak performance out of him. And we learned a ton, but couldn't be prouder.
Yeah, and also as well, sometimes it's a weird thing with teams and players individually. Like sometimes something has to happen, like you have to lose in like a really humiliating fashion. And in the same way you're talking about, you wake up the next day as champions and you're like, shit, I still got to get up and go to work. Like, I still got to take the bins out. Still got to do the washing up. I'm just like,
that's what I came home and I was at that blast party, having a fun time, taking photos, free drinks, free food, get on a business class ticket, fly home, get handed a newborn baby and told, change a diaper, I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But at the other end as well, it's like people are so scared of like losing. They make this big thing in their mind, this like terrifying experience you're going to go through. Like, oh God, if we lose to these guys, and then it happens. And then sometimes that can be, you wake up, I'm still alive. I'm still here.
Still here.
Yeah.
That happens all the time after losing. I famously told the guy, this was on TBS back when they were airing the major in Atlanta. I told the boys in a room, we don't need to lose to mouse sports today to know what it feels like to lose to mouse sports today. We've already lost. We don't need to go out there and experience that. You guys tell me you know what to do. Go ahead and do what Kassad's saying right now. Go ahead and do what Azer's saying right now. Let's go do that thing. And then after the match, it was kind of that, Edward, we just figured that out as a group of men, that you're right. We don't need to experience something bigger. And then we kind of ascended a little bit. But it's not about figuring out that you're the one. You just have to prepare and allow yourself, that's the key word, allow yourself to go do that. It's not thinking about, because G2, I think a little bit of the fixation was, we have to be champions. We have to think of it this way. And it's like, no, quit looking at the top of the mountain. We have to be looking at these little steps that we're taking together. And if we keep taking those steps, and that's what happened. If you notice, all the guys almost looked shocked when we won the title. We were just on day 7 of 7. We weren't ready for the championship. We were on day 7 of 7 of our trip together. And when you do that, you remove some of the bigger parts of it.
Well, so look, this is where it gets contentious. Because a man with your resume,
let's go.
What if? Okay, and this is honestly what I feel. Okay, based on just looking at things right now. What if the improvement in G2 was nominal, and actually it was everyone else who'd got significantly worse, and we go into next year? And we're about to hit Rostermania. There's 60 days until the ESL Pro League. Everyone's going to change up. We're already seeing that today at the time of recording this. We just had Nip make a change. So it's all coming. And what if this version of G2 is a right place, right time? It's a tournament at the end of the year. There's always asterisks next to those, post-major. What if this is a gift rather than an achievement?
Okay, my first answer to that is, and this one's for Petsa and for all of us. Hey guys, it was a fluke. It was a fluke title. Hey guys, that was a fluke title.
They do happen. I've seen them. I've seen them with my own eyes.
They sure do. My boys will love that because we don't mind being underdogs. Here's the reality of it. We can't control the opponent that you put in the room. We can't control how talented they are or how much they practiced for us or who's in the room doing what performance-wise. We can't control any of that. And frankly, we don't give a damn about that. We are very focused on what we are doing, not in a cliche sense. You put anybody in front of us and we are going to fight them. We are developing, and this is my favorite, maybe DNA of my practices. We're developing a resilient team right now. And just in the ascension of our resiliency, we just fluke or not fluke, won a tournament with some pretty good teams and knocked off some pretty good teams in the process who in the past we did not knock off. So whether or not that was us ascending or them failing, well, their failure in the past was still good enough to beat us. So, but right now we're ranked number 3rd in the world and we'll take that.
Yeah, okay hell of a jump up from 12. But again, but what I'm curious about is because you must have seen this before. I have. I used to be. I mean, obviously, don't have any of your credentials, but back in the early days of esports, I used to be a coach. I used to be a manager. I used to stand behind the team. I used to do the pep talks. I used to do the huddles. And I've seen it before. I've seen teams. They finally get over the hurdle of winning something or going beyond expectations. So success being relative. And then that's actually the worst thing that could have happened.
Oh, I've been a part of this already.
Yeah.
We in spring split at EG, we talked about how it would be a detriment if we qualified for MSI. And sorry to bring League of Legends into this, but
that
was a big thing for us because we kind of said, if we go to Korea for MSI, then we're not going to be able to do all of these things that we have planned, for next split, and then we won't be able to make the run at summer split the way that we want to. And nothing goes as planned is my answer to that. And if you sat down with Yuli, Petsa, and I, kind of the brain trust with Jan, our head coach or coach over at G2, and you asked us like, what's the goal for this blast tournament? It wasn't like win or die or we got to make changes or something. It was very much we're on a path and we're continuing on the path. So I'm not worried about the fact that we had success. That I'm not going to be worried about. I'll take all of it. But you bring up a great point because what you do is exhale. Always tougher to defend a title than to win a title, right?
Absolutely.
If you ask any repeat champion of anything, they'll tell you that. Yeah, it's tougher to go back the second time. Motivation's tougher. We're going to celebrate this trophy. We're celebrating it right now in our own ways, and then we'll recover and come prepared for 23. But at the same time, you're right. There's always a cost for success. So we are going to gauge against that. But would I rather of us come in 3rd place? I mean, of course not.
Of course not. I think the key thing I would want the guys to focus on and this is just my opinion, but I think I don't think winning this championship in any way makes up for not qualifying for a major. There's fewer of them. They're more prestigious. It's a different thing. I don't think the players would say that either. In a sense, this doesn't negate what we've. And I'm saying the collective we. Yeah, and this isn't really for the players so much as the fans, right?
Yeah, right. And it's not for me, right? It's for the G2 fans. Yeah. Sure, it may not negate some of the things that they've experienced, but even Nicola would say that he wouldn't say, well, now that I've won Blast, I don't care that I didn't win that major. I mean, that's not, Nemanja wouldn't say that either, so these are different things and they're both allowed to exist and you're allowed to stay hungry and say, well, I got one, now I want the others, let's go to Paris and get one then.
Yeah. Would there ever be a set of circumstances, let's say, I don't know, there was a roster change and they did decide to replace Hooksy, or Hooksy might be burnt out and might be like, you know what? That was a beautiful experience, but I need to be with my family right now, and I don't know when I'll be back. You might need to replace me, or maybe we get another crazy, unforeseen circumstance like another war or another pandemic, because last few years have been pretty in your face. Sure. And let's say there was a roster move, like JKS left, Hooksy left, Nico got bought out by another team or whatever. Do you because I know you're so close to some of these players, would that be like a deal breaker, or do you still see yourself as like, I am part of G2. I will continue to work there, whatever staff I have to work with, type thing.
You know, I would like to romanticize about Justin and that if he's in a retirement home someday playing Counter-Strike, I'd like to be there behind him in a walker, kind of cheering him on. So there's a part of me that wants to kind of just finish this career with him. In a lot of ways, though, I think we both view G2 being that spot. Mm-hmm. This is the spot where we win the titles. I told the guys that right when I first joined, because they kind of pressed me and said, well, you've been with Justin for 5 years. I said, yeah, 5 years running around the world with this guy. And this is the pinnacle. This is the place where we can lift trophies together. So we're 2 months into that mission together. So far, so good on that part of the chapter. I don't know. I'm really enjoying being at G2. I'm really enjoying what we're doing. The staff there is, they've treated me really well. And I've worked at a lot of orgs, and I don't mean to compare them, but I'm very pleased with how I'm being treated there. So as of right now, I'm not really necessarily looking to do anything different. But you know, if things change drastically, I mean, what if G2 said, "Oh, we're cutting budgets and we're not going to be a top 5 or 10 team anymore"? Yeah, I might say, "All right, I want to help the top tier teams." And I can't imagine Yuli putting us in a position where we're not contending for titles, and they've got me for all of 23. So they've already signed me up for the whole calendar year. And in my profession, that doesn't happen all
Pretty
the time.
Impressive debut as things happen.
Well, Yuli put his arm around me at the party afterwards and said, we're going to review your contract and see if we want to, keep you for 23. And I just laughed and walked away. No, we're developing something really special there. And I think G2 fans can take a little bit of an exhale and say, okay, and kind of trust that we're building something great right now.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is this. I understand why the fans were a bit like, because I'd actually said, and usually I give myself enough wriggle room that even if I'm wrong, it's usually based on a very small semantic argument. I did absolutely say I didn't think this lineup would achieve anything, and certainly winning an S-tier tournament is something, and therefore I was wrong about that part.
It's not maybe the same thing as a summer major. I'm okay with somebody feeling like that. That's fine. Yeah. But at the same time, I would say, and I say this to the management staffs of the orgs I interview with, I believe that my type of services could be a percentage of the performance capability of a team. And that's not to say that I had anything to do with our success. I'm not trying to take credit. What I'm saying is when you have a group of people together that are capable talent-wise, but aren't getting the job done, because you don't need to have the best 5 players on earth. I mean, you don't need 5 LeBron James to win the title. You need the best team. I'm from Detroit, so I'm kind of like the Pistons eras guys, right? Like we're all team vibes over here. But you take 5 people together.
My sympathy for the Lions, by the way.
Hey, we're not right
we're
now.
not this season. I'm a fucking Raiders fan, so yeah.
Oh my God. I lived just outside Oakland for a decade, so I know the pain out there too. And I don't like the buzzword synergy, but the collectiveness, right? And people can tear each other apart, or they can collectively grow together, and not having success for a while makes that kind of stagnant. So I think, some of the changes we might have made kind of reinvigorated this, and people accepted accountability. People really said, I'm not going to make this about me. I'm going to make it about we. And when you get 5 men that do that together, you're going to have success. So even if other teams make great roster moves, and I'm sure some of them will make, some big roster moves, even if they do that, good luck coming together the way these 5 will support each other. That's going to be a tough thing to replicate competitively.
Yeah, and I sort of forgive the G2 fans because, like, when you haven't won a big trophy since 2017, but you still support the org,
good on you. Thank you.
That's like rare. That's like rare as fuck in esports.
Yeah,
so
in esports, that's tough. The Launders kept announcing, it's been 1,092 days or whatever, right? And we're sitting there trying to close the map, and I've got my arm around Yuli, like, it's okay, we've got this, and he's been there for those, and I said, Yuli, we're there, we're okay. Success, people take different paths to success. So I'm glad we experienced it. Now it's not even an effort to sustain the championship mentality or culture. No, we're still in a growing phase. So we're gonna keep working hard on what we're doing, and I don't think we feel satisfied by this whatsoever.
So, look, last couple of questions, and then I'll let you get on with the rest of your day, which I'm sure is going to be action-packed and filled with all sorts
Snowy.
of... Oh, man, I'm super jealous. We got like 5 or 6 frosty days here where it was like -2. And then I was like, oh, please. Like, I love the snow, but yeah, not to be. We're back up to like 10 degrees and it's green outside and rainy. So classic British weather. But yeah, because there'll be a lot of like people watching this that are like, you know, aspirational pros. 3 things the everyday player can do that they're in total control of, that they can do to improve their ability to perform.
Number one, I'm going to be a little existential and then I'll bring you down a little bit.
Okay.
I want you to be mindful with your time. You need to understand the beginning and ending of your days. You should have a sleep window there. Ideally, you're asleep. It has to be before 2 a.m. And I tell my good streamers that, the big time streamers, you're going to burn out if it's after 2 a.m. You're going to screw up your hormones. You're not going to have a long-term success. So be mindful of your structure of how you're spending your day, okay? And the first 8 hours of your day are really important. So number 2 is, I want there to be something outdoors and sunlight. I don't care where you live on the planet. I don't care what time you get up. I still want you to go outside, even though there's benefits to doing it earlier in the day. 15 to 20 minutes, you've got to get out there. I know that sounds like a ton of time. Fine, start off with 2 minutes. Start off with something, okay? Number 3, I would say, try to eat real food. Why don't we start there? Eat a real meal. Plan what you're going to eat tomorrow. Have a concept of it. If you're going for more than 4 to 5 hours without eating on the server, and then you're unable to regulate your emotions, you're a chemical being. You have to understand your biochemistry better. It doesn't have anything to do with you not being able to have the willpower. Willpower is garbage. So this is much more about you putting yourself in a position to be able to succeed. So that starts with taking care of your body, your mind, and your schedule. If you can't do those 3 things, then good luck performing on the server long term.
Mm-hmm. And the very last one, obviously we know now you've signed up for G2 long term, but obviously you're a like you say, an entrepreneur, busy man. You do all sorts of other stuff. If somebody was watching this podcast and wanted to learn a bit more about you, your services, your background, that kind of thing, is there any other content or any other engagements where people could find you?
Sure. Certainly engage with me on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I do have a couple websites, although I don't really have any reason to plug them. If you wanted to reach out to me for services of some kind, I suppose you could just DM me on Twitter and I'll pass you along to my team and we could schedule something. I guess I would denote that I'm not full-time with G2. I'm outside. I'm not an internal employee. I'm not like the director of wellness or something. So I'm with their Counter-Strike team. So it's not that my staff and I can't handle more business, you know, so we're still open for business, quote unquote. But yeah, I'm happy to help. I'm here to help. I love working with the community. If there's some opportunity to help educate or to reach out and help, I would be very open to that. So don't be shy to reach out.
All right. There it is. We've done it. We've done a podcast, Edward. Excellent work. And there it is. There is the man who played, by his own humble estimations, a small role in G2's renewed success. He'll be hoping that there's more of it in 2023. I'm sure all the G2 fans will be as well. So go and support him. His Twitter account's there on your screen. Go follow him and engage with him. And if G2 do become the #1 team in the world and dominate 2023, egg on my face. And because I'm such a good sport and a humble guy myself, not that you would ever believe it, I will get in touch with G2 and we will work out some sort of forfeit. We'll
send you a jersey. We'll send you a jersey once we climb up a little bit higher on the rankings.
Yeah. Send me a jersey, but on the back it just says "dickhead." Right.
I don't think that's not really Yuli's karma that he puts out there. We'll get something in the mail for you for next year.
But anyway, there you go. Thanks so much for your time, Edward. Thanks for your time as well to all the viewers out there. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Be sure to support everyone. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps engagement, all that Zoomer influencer bullshit. And I'll see you in 2023 with another episode. Don't know who the guest will be. I never do. It'll be a banger. And until then, make sure you take care of yourselves. Bye.